The morning sun streamed through the windows of Riverside High School as students hurried through the hallways, their backpacks bouncing with each step. Among them, Riley moved at her own pace, her wheelchair gliding smoothly across the polished floors. She had learned to navigate these corridors like a pro over the past 2 years, knowing exactly which routes to take to avoid the worst of the morning rush. Riley's day always started the same way. Mrs. Patterson, her elderly neighbor, would drive her to school in her old blue van with the wheelchair lift that made a funny squeaking sound every time it lowered. Mrs. Patterson was like a grandmother to Riley, always asking about her classes and reminding her to eat lunch. This morning had been no different. "Now remember, sweetie," Mrs. Patterson had said as Riley transferred into her wheelchair, "if anyone gives you trouble today, you just call me. I may be 73, but I can still give someone a piece of my mind." Riley had laughed and promised she would, even though she rarely called Mrs. Patterson for help. She had worked too hard to become independent again to start relying on others now. The accident had happened when Riley was 15. She had been riding in the passenger seat of her older brother's car when another driver ran a red light. Her brother walked away with a few scratches, but Riley's life changed forever that day. The doctors said she would never walk again. For months, she felt like her world had ended. She loved dancing, playing soccer, and just running around with her friends. Suddenly, all of that seemed impossible. But Riley was stubborn. Her mom always said she got that from her dad's side of the family. Instead of giving up, she decided to figure out how to live her new life. Physical therapy was hard and painful, but she pushed through it. Learning to use a wheelchair took time, but she practiced every day. The hardest part was going back to school and facing everyone's stares and whispered conversations. Now, as a junior at Riverside High, Riley had found her rhythm. She knew which classrooms had the best wheelchair access, which bathroom stalls were actually big enough for her chair, and which teachers understood that she might need a little extra time getting to class. She had even found something she was passionate about again: art. Riley's art teacher, Mr. Chen, had been the first person at school to treat her exactly the same as before the accident. He didn't speak louder or slower to her, didn't ask if she needed help every 5 minutes, and definitely didn't look at her with that sad, pitying expression that made her want to scream. Instead, he had simply handed her a paintbrush on her first day back and said, "I've been saving this canvas for you." Art class had become Riley's favorite hour of the day. There she could lose herself in colors and shapes, creating worlds where wheelchairs didn't matter and where she could be anyone she wanted to be. Her paintings were getting good too. Mr. Chen had even suggested she enter some pieces in the upcoming school art show. But not everyone at Riverside High was as understanding as Mr. Chen. Riley had noticed the way some students would quickly look away when she rolled past, as if making eye contact might somehow make them catch what she had. Others would stare openly, nudging their friends and whispering comments they thought she couldn't hear. The worst ones, though, were the students who seemed to go out of their way to make her life difficult. There was this group of kids who would deliberately walk slowly in front of her in the hallways, forcing her to follow at their pace even when she was already running late for class. They would lean against the elevator buttons so she couldn't reach them, then act like it was an accident when she asked them to move. Small things, but they added up to make each day a little bit harder. Riley had learned to handle most of these situations on her own. She found alternate routes through the school, learned which elevators were usually less crowded, and always left for class a few minutes early to account for any obstacles. She didn't want to be seen as someone who complained or caused trouble. She just wanted to get through high school like any other student. On this particular Tuesday morning, Riley was heading to her locker before first period when she noticed a new face in the crowd. A tall girl with beautiful dark skin and hair pulled back in a colorful headband was standing by the main office, looking at a schedule in her hand. She seemed to be trying to figure out where to go, turning the paper this way and that, with a slightly frustrated expression. The new girl caught Riley's attention because she didn't look nervous like most transfer students did on their first day. Instead, she looked determined, like she was ready to take on whatever Riverside High could throw at her. There was something about the way she stood with her shoulders back and her chin up that reminded Riley of her own attitude when she had first returned to school after the accident. As Riley watched, she saw another student bump into the new girl, causing her to drop her schedule. The student didn't stop to apologize or help pick it up, just kept walking as if nothing had happened. The new girl bent down to retrieve her paper, and Riley could see a flash of annoyance cross her face. But she just straightened up, smoothed out the schedule, and continued studying it. Riley found herself rolling closer, curious about this girl who seemed so confident on what had to be a nerve-wracking first day. As she got nearer, she could hear the new girl muttering to herself, "Room 204, where are you hiding?" "Second floor, east wing," Riley said, causing the girl to look up in surprise. "The elevators are right around that corner if you need them." The new girl smiled, and it was the kind of smile that reached her eyes and made her whole face light up. "Thanks, I'm Destiny, by the way. First day here and I'm already lost. Riley, and don't worry, everyone gets lost the first week. This place is like a maze. What's your first class?" "AP History with Mrs. Rodriguez." "Oh, she's great. Tough but fair. You'll like her." Riley paused, then added, "I'm heading that way anyway. Want to walk together?" Destiny looked relieved. "That would be amazing, thank you." As they made their way through the hallways, Riley found herself genuinely enjoying the conversation. Destiny was funny and easy to talk to, and she didn't seem fazed at all by Riley's wheelchair. She didn't ask awkward questions about what had happened to her or offer unwanted sympathy. Instead, she treated Riley like she would any other person she had just met, which was exactly what Riley had hoped for. Destiny told her she had moved here from Detroit because her mom got a new job at the hospital. She was nervous about starting over at a new school in the middle of the year, but excited about the opportunities that might come with a fresh start. She loved reading, was on the debate team at her old school, and was hoping to start a book club here at Riverside. By the time they reached Mrs. Rodriguez's classroom, Riley realized she was actually disappointed their conversation had to end. It had been a while since she had connected with someone new so easily. Most of the friends she had made since the accident were people who had known her before, who remembered the old Riley and were still adjusting to the new one. But Destiny only knew this Riley, the one in the wheelchair, and she seemed perfectly fine with that. "Thanks for the guide service," Destiny said as they stopped outside the classroom door. "Maybe I'll see you at lunch?" "Yeah, I'd like that," Riley replied, meaning it more than she had expected to. As Riley headed to her own first period class, she found herself looking forward to lunch in a way she hadn't in months. Maybe having a new friend at Riverside High wouldn't be such a bad thing after all. The lunch bell rang at exactly 12:15, and Riley felt her stomach flutter with a mix of hunger and anticipation. She had been thinking about her conversation with Destiny all morning, wondering if the new girl would actually remember their plans to meet up. In her experience, people often made polite promises they didn't really intend to keep. Riley navigated her way to her locker, spinning the combination lock with practiced ease. She grabbed her lunch bag and her sketchbook, a habit she had developed over the past year. Drawing during lunch helped her feel productive, and it also gave her something to focus on when she felt self-conscious about eating alone. The cafeteria was its usual chaos of noise and movement. Students clustered around tables based on invisible social rules that Riley had never quite figured out. The athletes sat near the windows. The theater kids claimed the corner by the stage, and various other groups had staked out their territories throughout the large room. Riley usually found a quiet spot at one of the smaller tables near the art display cases. It wasn't the most popular area, but she could see her own artwork hanging on the wall from there, which always made her feel a little proud. Today, though, she decided to sit outside in the courtyard instead. The weather was nice, and she thought the fresh air might help calm her nerves about meeting up with Destiny. The courtyard was less crowded than the cafeteria, with only a few groups of students scattered across the concrete picnic tables and wooden benches. Riley found an empty table under a large oak tree and settled in, pulling out her sandwich and opening her sketchbook to a fresh page. She had just started sketching the outline of the tree above her when she heard footsteps approaching. Looking up, she saw 3 boys walking in her direction, and her stomach immediately tightened. She recognized them, though she didn't know their names. They were the type of students who seemed to think the whole school belonged to them, walking through the hallways like they owned the place. The one in the front was tall and broad-shouldered, probably a football player based on his size. He had that kind of confident swagger that came from never having been told no about anything important. The other 2 followed slightly behind him like satellites orbiting around his popularity. Riley looked back down at her sketchbook, hoping they would just pass by. She had learned that avoiding eye contact was often the best strategy when she sensed trouble coming. But instead of walking past, she heard the footsteps stop right next to her table. "Well, look what we have here," the tall one said, his voice loud enough that other students in the courtyard turned to look. "It's Wheels." Riley's hand tightened around her pencil, but she kept her eyes on her sketch. She had heard that nickname before, whispered in hallways and muttered behind her back. It wasn't the worst thing people had called her, but it still stung every time. "What are you drawing there, Wheels?" one of the other boys asked, leaning over to look at her sketchbook. "Let me see." Before Riley could react, he had reached over and snatched the sketchbook right out of her hands. She looked up then, anger flashing in her eyes. "Give that back," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The boy flipped through the pages, making exaggerated, interested noises. "Oh, wow, look at this, guys. She draws trees and flowers and little birdies. How adorable." "Maybe she draws them because she can't actually go hiking to see them in real life," the tall one said, and his friends laughed like it was the funniest joke they had ever heard. Riley felt heat rising in her cheeks. "Give me my sketchbook back now." "Or what?" the tall one asked, stepping closer to her table. "You going to chase me?" The cruelty in his voice made something twist in Riley's stomach. She had dealt with ignorant comments and thoughtless behavior before, but this felt different. This felt deliberate and mean in a way that took her breath away. "Look, just leave me alone," Riley said, reaching for her sketchbook. But the boy holding it pulled it away, holding it up high where she couldn't reach it from her seated position. "What's the magic word?" he asked, grinning at his friends. Other students in the courtyard were starting to notice the commotion now. Riley could see them pulling out their phones, probably getting ready to record whatever happened next. The thought of becoming some viral video made her feel sick. "Please," she said quietly, hating how small her voice sounded. "Please give it back." "I don't think she said it loud enough," the tall one said. "Maybe she should beg a little louder." "Come on, Wheels," another one chimed in. "Let's see how badly you want it back." Riley felt tears starting to burn behind her eyes, and she blinked hard to keep them from falling. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry, but she also didn't know how to get out of this situation. Even if she tried to wheel away, they could easily follow her or block her path. The boy with her sketchbook started flipping through it again, this time more roughly. "You know what? I think these drawings need some improvement." He grabbed a pen from his pocket and started scribbling on one of her paintings, a watercolor of a sunset that she had been particularly proud of. Riley watched in horror as he drew crude marks across the delicate colors she had spent hours perfecting. "Stop it," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Please just stop," but they weren't stopping. If anything, they seemed encouraged by her distress. The tall one reached over and knocked her lunch bag off the table, sending her sandwich and apple rolling across the concrete. Her water bottle fell and cracked open, spilling its contents across the ground. "Oops," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "Looks like you made a mess, Wheels." Riley stared at her lunch scattered on the ground, at her precious sketchbook being ruined in front of her eyes, and felt completely helpless. This was exactly what she had feared when she first came back to school after the accident, being seen as weak, as an easy target, as someone who couldn't defend herself. The boy finished his vandalism and tossed the sketchbook onto the wet concrete, where it landed with a splash in the spilled water. Pages that had taken Riley months to fill with her artwork were now soaked and torn. "Maybe next time you'll think twice about sitting in our spot," the tall one said, like they had some legitimate claim to this random table in the courtyard. Riley looked around desperately, hoping that a teacher might appear or that someone might step in to help. But the other students were either pretending not to see what was happening or actively recording it for their social media accounts. She felt more alone than she had since those first terrible weeks after the accident. Just as the boys seemed ready to escalate their harassment even further, Riley heard a clear, strong voice cut through the air. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Everyone turned to see who had spoken, and Riley felt a rush of relief when she saw Destiny walking toward them with determined steps. The new girl's friendly demeanor from that morning had been replaced by something much more serious and focused. The tall boy looked Destiny up and down with obvious disdain. "Mind your own business, new girl. This doesn't concern you." Destiny stopped right next to Riley's table and looked directly at each of the three boys. "Actually, it does concern me. I'm making it my business." She knelt down and started gathering Riley's scattered lunch items, then carefully picked up the wet sketchbook. Riley could see her examining the damage, her jaw tightening as she took in the ruined artwork. "You need to apologize," Destiny said, standing back up to face the boys. "Right now." The tall one laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Or what, you and Wheels here are going to make us?" "My name is Riley," Destiny said firmly, "and you're going to learn to use it." Riley watched in amazement as this girl she had just met that morning stood up to three boys who were clearly looking for trouble. Destiny wasn't backing down, wasn't trying to smooth things over or find a diplomatic solution. She was simply standing there, radiating a quiet strength that made the boys' bullying seem small and pathetic by comparison. The confrontation was far from over, but for the first time since this nightmare had started, Riley felt like she wasn't facing it alone. The courtyard had gone completely quiet except for the sound of Riley's heart pounding in her ears. Destiny stood between her and the three boys, and there was something in her posture that reminded Riley of a guardian protecting something precious. The new girl wasn't much taller than Riley would have been standing, but somehow she seemed to take up more space than all three boys combined. "Look, I don't know how things worked at your old school," the tall boy said, his voice taking on a nastier edge, "but around here, we don't need outsiders telling us what to do." Destiny's expression didn't change. "And I don't need bullies telling me what I can and can't stand up for." Riley watched the exchange with a mixture of gratitude and worry. She was amazed that Destiny was defending her, but she also didn't want the new girl to get in trouble on her first day because of her problems. These boys had been making her life difficult for months, and she had learned to handle it by staying out of their way. But Destiny was walking straight into a fight that wasn't even hers. "Destiny, it's okay," Riley said quietly. "You don't have to do this." But Destiny turned to look at her with such fierce determination that Riley's words died in her throat. "No, it's not okay. None of this is okay." She picked up Riley's ruined sketchbook and held it up for everyone to see. The water had made the pages curl and warp, and the pen marks had bled across Riley's carefully painted sunset, turning it into an ugly smear of colors. "This is someone's art," Destiny said, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "Hours of work, creativity, something beautiful that she made with her own hands. And you destroyed it for what? To feel powerful? To get a laugh?" Some of the students who had been recording put their phones down, suddenly seeming uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. Riley noticed a few of them actually looked ashamed, like they were just realizing they had been watching someone be hurt instead of helping. The tall boy's face was getting red now. Whether from embarrassment or anger, Riley couldn't tell. She shouldn't have been sitting here if she didn't want trouble. "She was eating lunch," Destiny said, her voice incredulous. "In a public courtyard. At her own school. What exactly did she do wrong?" "Look, you don't understand how things work here," one of the other boys said, stepping forward like he was trying to back up his friend. "Maybe you should just mind your own business before you get yourself in trouble too." That was apparently the wrong thing to say. Destiny's eyes flashed with something that made even Riley feel a little nervous. "Are you threatening me?" Destiny asked, her voice deadly calm. "Because that's what it sounds like. You're threatening a new student for standing up to bullies." Riley could see that a small crowd was starting to gather around them now. Word had spread through the cafeteria that something was happening outside, and students were coming out to watch. She recognized some faces from her classes. Kids who had seen her around school but had never really talked to her. "Nobody's threatening anybody," the tall boy said, but his voice lacked the confidence it had held a few minutes earlier. "We're just having a conversation." "No," Destiny said firmly. "A conversation is what Riley and I were planning to have over lunch. What you're doing is bullying, and it stops right now." She bent down and started gathering the rest of Riley's things, carefully placing the damaged sketchbook on top of the pile. Then she straightened up and looked directly at Riley. "Do you want to go somewhere else to eat lunch?" she asked, as if the three boys weren't even there anymore. Riley nodded, not trusting her voice. Destiny walked around to the back of her wheelchair without asking permission and started pushing her away from the table. Riley was surprised by how smoothly Destiny maneuvered the chair, like she actually knew what she was doing. "Hey!" the tall boy called after them. "We're not done here." Destiny stopped and turned around, still holding on to Riley's wheelchair handles. "Yes, you are. Unless you want me to go find a teacher and explain what happened to Riley's artwork and her lunch." The threat hung in the air for a moment. Riley held her breath, wondering if the boys would back down or if things were about to get much worse. She could see the tall boy calculating, trying to decide if whatever satisfaction he got from tormenting her was worth potential consequences. Finally, he shrugged like the whole thing had been beneath his notice anyway. Whatever. Come on, guys. Let's go find somewhere that doesn't smell like charity cases. As the three boys walked away, Riley felt like she could breathe again for the first time in 20 minutes. But she also felt confused and overwhelmed by everything that had just happened. Destiny had stepped in to defend her without hesitation, but Riley wasn't used to being rescued. For 2 years she had been working so hard to prove she could handle things on her own. "Are you okay?" Destiny asked, coming around to face her. "Did they hurt you?" Riley shook her head. "No, they didn't touch me. But my sketchbook—" She trailed off, looking at the ruined pages. "I'm so sorry about your art," Destiny said, and the genuine sadness in her voice made Riley's throat tight. "It must have taken you forever to create all those drawings." "It's just a sketchbook," Riley said, trying to sound like it didn't matter. But even as she said it, she knew Destiny could see through the lie. "No, it's not just a sketchbook. It's your work, your vision, your creativity, and they had no right to destroy it." Riley looked up at Destiny, this girl she had met only a few hours ago, and felt something crack open in her chest. When was the last time someone had been so angry on her behalf? When had anyone understood so clearly why this mattered? "Thank you," she said quietly, "for standing up for me. You didn't have to do that." Destiny sat down on the bench next to Riley's wheelchair, her expression softening. "Of course I did. That's what people should do for each other." "Most people don't, though," Riley said, thinking about all the students who had watched and recorded but hadn't said a word. "Then most people are wrong," Destiny said simply. "My mom always taught me that silence in the face of injustice is just another form of participation." Riley considered this. She had been silent about the boys' behavior for months, telling herself she was just trying to avoid drama. But maybe her silence had been making things worse, not better. "They've been doing stuff like this for a while," she admitted. "Not always this bad, but little things. Making my life harder." Destiny nodded like she wasn't surprised. "Bullies usually start small and work their way up. They test boundaries to see what they can get away with." "I just wanted to handle it myself," Riley said. "I didn't want to be seen as someone who needed special protection or couldn't fight her own battles." "But this wasn't a fair fight," Destiny pointed out. "It was 3 against 1, and they were counting on you being too intimidated to fight back. That's not strength on their part. That's cowardice." Riley had never thought of it that way before. She had been so focused on proving her independence that she hadn't recognized the impossible situation she had been put in. "What you did back there," Riley said, "standing up to them like that. Weren't you scared?" Destiny was quiet for a moment, considering the question.
"Yeah, I was scared."
"But I was also angry. Really, really angry. And sometimes anger can be more powerful than fear." Riley looked at her new friend with growing admiration. "Have you had to do things like this before?" "A few times," Destiny said. "At my old school, there were some kids who thought it was fun to make comments about my race. I learned pretty quickly that bullies don't usually stop on their own. Someone has to make them stop." Riley felt a connection forming between them, built on shared experience and mutual understanding. They had both faced cruelty from classmates. Both had to figure out how to survive in environments that weren't always welcoming. "So what happens now?" Riley asked. "They said they weren't done with me." Destiny's expression grew determined again. "Now we make sure this doesn't happen again. To you or to anyone else." Riley wasn't sure what that meant exactly, but something in Destiny's voice made her believe it was possible. For the first time in months, she felt like she wasn't facing her problems alone. And that made all the difference in the world. The rest of Tuesday passed in a strange blur for Riley. Word about the confrontation in the courtyard had spread through the school like wildfire, and she found herself at the center of attention in a way she had never experienced before. Some students looked at her with sympathy, others with curiosity, and a few with what seemed like newfound respect. But Riley barely noticed the stares and whispers. Her mind kept replaying the moment when Destiny had stepped in to defend her, the fearless way she had faced down 3 boys who clearly thought they could intimidate anyone they wanted. Nobody had ever stood up for Riley like that before. and she wasn't sure how to process the mixture of gratitude and complicated feelings it had stirred up. When she got home that afternoon, Mrs. Patterson was waiting in her driveway as usual, ready to help carry her backpack and hear about her day. But one look at Riley's face told the older woman that something was wrong. "What happened, sweetie?" Mrs. Patterson asked as she lifted Riley's damaged sketchbook from her lap. "Oh my goodness, what happened to your beautiful artwork?" Riley found herself telling the whole story. From the boys approaching her table to Destiny's intervention, to the crowd of students who had watched it all unfold. Mrs. Patterson listened with growing outrage, her normally gentle expression becoming fierce. "Those boys should be reported to the principal immediately," she said. "This is completely unacceptable behavior." "I don't know," Riley said hesitantly. "Maybe if I just avoid them, it will blow over." Mrs. Patterson gave her a look that reminded Riley why the elderly woman had once been a high school principal herself. "Honey, bullies don't just blow over. They get worse until someone makes them stop." That evening, Riley tried to focus on her homework, but her mind kept wandering to Destiny's words about silence being a form of participation. Had her months of trying to handle the situation quietly actually made things worse? Had other students assumed she was okay with being treated that way because she never complained? The next morning, Riley was surprised to find Destiny waiting by her locker before first period. The new girl's usually bright expression was clouded with concern. "How are you feeling today?" Destiny asked as Riley worked her combination lock. "Better, thanks to you," Riley said honestly. "I still can't believe you did that." "I've been thinking about it all night," Destiny said. "And I think we need to talk to someone in authority about what happened. Those boys can't just get away with destroying your property and harassing you." Riley's stomach clenched. "I don't want to be seen as a tattletale." "You wouldn't be tattling," Destiny said firmly. "You would be reporting harassment and vandalism. There's a big difference." Before Riley could respond, she noticed students around them starting to whisper and point. Following their gazes, she saw the tall boy from yesterday approaching with his two friends. But something was different about their body language today. They looked angry in a way that made Riley's skin crawl. Well, the tall boy said loudly enough for half the hallway to hear. "If it isn't Wheels and her new bodyguard." Destiny stepped slightly in front of Riley's wheelchair, her posture immediately defensive. "Is there something you need?" "Just wanted to have a little chat," he said, but his tone was anything but friendly. "See, new girl, you embarrassed us yesterday. Made us look bad in front of the whole school. That's not something we're just going to forget." Riley felt her heart rate spike. This was exactly what she had been afraid of, that Destiny's intervention would make things worse instead of better. "You embarrassed yourselves," Destiny said calmly. "All I did was point it out." "Funny," one of the other boys said. "Because from where we were standing, it looked like some outsider was sticking her nose where it didn't belong." Riley could see other students starting to gather around them, sensing drama. Some had their phones out again, ready to record whatever happened next. The thought of becoming a viral video made her feel sick all over again. "Look," Riley said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Maybe we can all just move on from yesterday and forget it happened." But the tall boy shook his head. "Too late for that, Wheels. Your friend here made sure of that." Destiny's jaw tightened.
My name is Destiny.
"Her name is Riley. And if you can't remember that, maybe you should write it down." The hallway was getting more crowded now, and Riley could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on them. She wanted to disappear, to roll away and hide in a bathroom until this all blew over. But Destiny was standing her ground again, refusing to back down even though she was clearly outnumbered. "You think you're pretty tough, don't you?" the tall boy said, stepping closer to Destiny. "New girl comes in thinking she can change how things work around here." "I don't think I'm tough," Destiny said. "I know I'm right." Riley watched in horror as the boy reached out and shoved Destiny hard in the shoulder, causing her to stumble backward. The crowd around them gasped, and several students started recording more intently. "That's enough," a voice called out from behind the crowd. Everyone turned to see Mr. Chen, Riley's art teacher, pushing through the circle of students. His usually calm demeanor was replaced by obvious anger as he took in the scene. "What exactly is going on here?" he demanded, looking directly at the three boys. "Nothing, Mr. Chen," the tall boy said, his aggressive posture immediately shifting to fake innocence. "We were just talking." "Talking doesn't usually involve physical contact," Mr. Chen said dryly. He looked at Destiny, who was rubbing her shoulder where she had been shoved. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine." Destiny said, though Riley could see she was shaken. Mr. Chen's expression suggested he didn't believe the tall boy's explanation for a second. All 5 of you in my classroom now. As they filed into the art room, Riley felt like she was walking into a courtroom. Mr. Chen closed the door behind them and crossed his arms, waiting for an explanation. Riley, he said gently, would you like to tell me what's been happening? For a moment, Riley hesitated. This was her chance to minimize the situation, to smooth things over and hope they would all just leave her alone. But then she looked at Destiny, who had risked herself twice now to defend someone she barely knew, and she made a decision. They've been bullying me for months, she said quietly. Yesterday they destroyed my sketchbook and knocked over my lunch. Destiny stood up for me, and now they're threatening both of us. Mr. Chen's expression grew darker as Riley explained everything that had been happening. When she finished, he turned to the 3 boys. Is this true? She's exaggerating, the tall boy said. We were just messing around. Destroying someone's artwork and threatening them is not messing around, Mr. Chen said firmly. It's harassment and it stops right now. He picked up his phone and dialed the main office. Mrs. Williams, this is David Chen. I need you to call these students' parents and schedule a meeting with Principal Martinez. We have a serious bullying situation that needs to be addressed immediately. As Mr. Chen read off the boys' names, Riley felt a mixture of relief and terror. Finally, someone in authority was taking this seriously. But she also knew this meant the situation was about to become very real and very public. When the boys were escorted to the principal's office 20 minutes later, Riley and Destiny found themselves alone with Mr. Chen. The art teacher looked at both girls with a mixture of pride and concern. You did the right thing by speaking up, he told Riley. And you, he said to Destiny, showed remarkable courage. But I want you both to understand that this might get worse before it gets better. Riley nodded, finally accepting that there was no going back now. The fight was out in the open, and she would have to see it through to the end. But for the first time in months, she didn't feel like she was facing it alone. Destiny reached over and squeezed her hand. Whatever happens next, we'll handle it together. Riley squeezed back, feeling stronger than she had in a long time. Maybe Destiny was right. Maybe some fights were worth having, especially when you didn't have to fight them alone. 3 weeks later, Riley sat in the same courtyard where everything had started. But the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. Instead of eating alone while trying to avoid trouble, she was surrounded by a small group of students working on colorful poster boards spread across 2 picnic tables. What do you think about this slogan? Asked Maya, a sophomore from Riley's art class, holding up a bright blue poster that read, Be the voice, not the echo. I love it, Destiny said, looking up from her own poster. It's exactly what we're trying to say. Riley smiled as she watched her friend carefully paint the letters on a banner that would hang in the main hallway. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of meetings, conversations, and changes that Riley never could have imagined when this all started. The meeting with Principal Martinez had gone better than Riley had dared to hope. The 3 boys faced serious consequences: suspension, mandatory counseling, and community service hours that they would complete by helping maintain the school's accessibility features. More importantly, their parents had been horrified when they learned what their sons had been doing, and genuine apologies had followed. But the real change had come from what happened after that meeting. Destiny had approached Principal Martinez with an idea that had been forming in her mind since that first day in the courtyard. We want to start an anti-bullying club, she had said. Not just to punish people after bad things happen, but to prevent them from happening in the first place. Riley had been amazed by how quickly other students had wanted to get involved once they heard about the club. It turned out that a lot of kids had their own stories about feeling excluded, targeted, or different. They just hadn't known there was a way to do something about it. Maya had joined because she had been bullied for being overweight. Alex, a quiet junior who rarely spoke in class, had opened up about being made fun of for his stutter. Jessica, one of the popular girls Riley had never expected to care about these issues, had surprised everyone by talking about the pressure and cruel comments she faced for being the only black student in advanced placement classes. I never said anything before, because I thought people would think I was being dramatic, Jessica had explained during one of their first meetings. But watching what happened to Riley made me realize that staying quiet wasn't protecting anyone. The club had started with just 5 members, But word had spread quickly. Students who had witnessed the courtyard incident began reaching out, some to apologize for not stepping in, others to volunteer their help. Teachers started referring kids who were struggling with social issues. Even some of the students who had been recording that day had approached Riley to ask how they could make things right. "You know what's funny?" Riley said, putting down her paintbrush and looking around at the group of students working so intently on their awareness campaign. "I spent so long trying to prove I didn't need help from anyone. But this whole thing has taught me that asking for help isn't the same as being weak. And giving help doesn't make you a hero," Destiny added. "It just makes you human." Mr. Chen had become the club's faculty advisor, and he had helped them navigate the school bureaucracy to make their ideas reality. They had established a peer mediation program, created safe spaces for students who felt isolated, and organized awareness events that had genuinely changed the culture at Riverside High. The biggest success had been their Upstander challenge, where students pledged to speak up when they witnessed bullying instead of being silent bystanders. What had started as a simple idea had grown into a school-wide movement, with over 200 students taking the pledge. "I still can't believe how much has changed," said Alex, who had become much more confident about speaking up in the weeks since joining the club. 3 weeks ago, I would never have imagined myself helping to organize something like this." Riley nodded, thinking about how different her own life had become. The girl who had tried so hard to be invisible was now co-president of a club that was making real changes in her school. She had given presentations to the school board, been interviewed for the local newspaper, and even been invited to speak at other schools about disability awareness and inclusion. "The best part," Riley said, "is that it's not just about bullying anymore. We're actually helping people understand each other better." The club had organized events that brought together students from different social groups, created mentorship programs that paired upperclassmen with underclassmen, and established a buddy system for new students so no one would have to navigate Riverside High alone the way Destiny had on her first day. "Speaking of understanding each other better," Destiny said with a grin, "did you see that Tyler asked if he could join the club?" Riley looked up in surprise. Tyler was one of the boys who had been with the tall boy that day in the courtyard. "Really? What did you tell him?" "That he could earn his way in by completing 20 hours of community service and writing an essay about what he learned from the whole experience," Destiny said. He actually seemed relieved to have a way to make things right. It had taken Riley weeks to understand that not everyone who had participated in her harassment had been motivated by cruelty. Some had just been following along, too afraid of becoming targets themselves to speak up. The restorative justice approach Principal Martinez had implemented had helped several of those students find ways to make amends and become better people. "I think we're ready for tomorrow," Maya said, stepping back to admire their completed posters. Tomorrow was the school's first annual Inclusion Day, an event the club had organized to celebrate diversity and promote understanding among all students. "I'm nervous," Riley admitted. "Speaking in front of the whole school feels scarier than everything else we've done combined." "You'll be amazing," Destiny said confidently. "Besides, you won't be up there alone. We're all in this together, remember?" Riley looked around at the faces of her friends and felt a surge of gratitude that still sometimes took her breath away. 3 weeks ago, she had been eating lunch alone, trying to make herself invisible. Now she was part of something bigger than herself, surrounded by people who had become like family. "You know what I realized?" Riley said as they started packing up their supplies. "I used to think that being strong meant not needing anyone else. But real strength is about building connections with people who make you stronger." As they walked back into the school building together, Riley caught sight of her reflection in the windows. The girl looking back at her was different from the one who had been sitting alone in this courtyard 3 weeks ago. She looked confident, purposeful, and genuinely happy. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Patterson. "Saw the article about your club in the newspaper. So proud of the young woman you've become. Can't wait to hear about your speech tomorrow." Riley smiled and showed the message to Destiny, who had become almost as close to Mrs. Patterson as Riley herself was over the past few weeks. "She's right, you know," Destiny said. "You really have become someone amazing." "We both have," Riley replied. "And tomorrow we're going to help other people see that they can become amazing too." As they headed to their next class, Riley felt a deep sense of peace about the future. There would still be challenges ahead. Still moments when standing up for what was right would require courage she wasn't sure she possessed. But she had learned something invaluable over the past 3 weeks. When people come together to support each other, there's almost nothing they can't accomplish. The girl in the wheelchair and the girl who had stepped up to defend her had become more than friends. They had become partners in creating the kind of world they wanted to live in, one conversation and one act of courage at a time.